In the incredible Anoa'i dynasty in pro wrestling, there is not only Roman Reigns, the Rock and Yokozuna, just to name a few, but another superstar was also part of it, and not just anyone, the Samoan Bulldozer Umaga. Unfortunately, he is a wrestler who left us way too soon, and quite frankly, I think he deserves to be remembered as much as the other legends of his family. So, in this video, we will dive together into the career of the wild beast and see everything that made him special in my eyes. And let me warn you, chances are that you will be a fan of him at the end. You are on the wrestling paradise. Why Umaga was so great, here we go. The first thing that made Umaga awesome was obviously his family. Long before becoming the Samoan Bulldozer, Umaga, whose real name is Edward Fatu, was born on March 28, 1973 in American Samoa. And he was not born into just any family. The Samoan dynasty of the Anoa'i. In this bloodline there is, check this out, Afa and SIKOA, his uncles, who formed the legendary Wild Samoans team in the 80s in the WWE and who were inducted into the Hall of Fame in 2007, his cousin Yokozuna. Another legendary superstar who with his sumo character made an impact in the 90s and that he will have tattooed on his forearm, his other cousin, The Rock. If you smell what he's cooking, perhaps the most famous wrestler in the business and today a successful actor in Hollywood. He even has another cousin, a certain Roman Reigns, the tribal chief, who since 2020 has been writing history in wrestling and who day after day becomes one of the greatest of all time. Moreover, in the bloodline, the Usos and Solo SIKOA are simply his nephews. Learning all this, we can only say to ourselves that this is an amazing family. And yet that's not all. There are also his two brothers who are about 8 years older than him, the Tonga Kid, who was in the Federation in the 80s, and Rikishi, whose little dances and the stink face were memorable during the Attitude Era. We can already see that by being born into such a lineage, his destiny as a wrestler seemed all mapped out, that he had the business in his DNA. Who can sit at my table and tell me I know a more prominent family in wrestling? Frankly, having so many wrestlers of the same family is simply amazing, and there are even others that I haven't mentioned, like Rocky Johnson. The fact that Umaga comes from all this heritage, it clearly makes him someone special. He had wrestling in his blood. And precisely, it enables me to talk about another huge quality that he had. His looks and his physical abilities. This is a strength of his from the time when he was still in the company's developmental. You should know that when they fired many of the talents from developmental to put everyone at Ohio Valley Wrestling and no longer collaborate with the Heartland Wrestling Association, with Rosie, Roman Reigns' brother, they will have several dark matches in the fall of 2001, especially against the Haas brothers. And that had indeed convinced the officials to keep him and soon throw him into the main roster. As Jim Ross, who was also working behind the scenes of the company at the time, says, he was always going to be special. You just can't find somebody with his traits and his size, his look. They don't grow in trees. But he didn't lay around on the mat and take an hour to get up. He was down and up, down and up. He had great agility and coordination. And it's true that for a guy of his size, 350 pounds, his agility and his speed were so impressive. Still, Jim Ross said of him that he was incredibly athletic for a guy that big, that he was a super heavyweight who had light heavyweight feet. We can say that he really has the total package, the look, the attitude, and the in-ring abilities, and that must have made the officials put him forward even more. It's not every day that we see such a physically imposing wrestler climb on the top rope for a splash, move very vividly, get up quickly when he's on the mat. Umaga was so talented, he really had a perfect mix of power, physicality, and agility. And in addition, he was a force of nature since Journey Fatu, his nephew, said. He was changing a tire early in the morning. I'm walking across to take the garbage out. I see my uncle changing the tire, but the bolt was stripped or stuck, whatever it was. I kid you not. I see this man get frustrated and look at the little crowbar. He just stepped on it, and that whole thing popped off. He was strong. Can you only imagine the damage he could do to his opponents if he was also pissed off? In his career, he first had a role that had nothing to do with the character of Umaga, which shows how he was able to be in several totally different registers. From the summer of 2002, he formed with Rosie and later Rico Constantino, the 3-minute warning team. The concept was great, I think. Initially, Eric Bischoff, the general manager of Raw, appeared during a match that was boring, for example, and said that they have 3 minutes to entertain him. When the time was up, Umaga, who at that time was called Jamal, and Rosie would pop up in the ring and demolish the wrestlers. They were Bischoff's henchmen who will each time give the people in the ring 3 minutes to entertain him or risk getting destroyed by them. Even if it was in a tag team, it was nevertheless a role that led him to be associated with the general manager of Raw, which isn't nothing. and to be directly involved in some storylines of the show as heels who attack everyone. With his very ghetto style, his Samoan drop, his splash, his physical presence, we could already see that Umaga was a star. And he went from a physically dominant thug character to the one of a wild beast who screams in Samoan and destroys everything in his path, the Samoan Bulldozer Umaga. The backstage of the creation of this character is very interesting, by the way. One day, Michael Hayes, one of the officials called Armando Estrada, who was going to become the Samoans' manager, telling him that with Umaga they would start right after WrestleMania 22 in April 2006, and that they were going to push them, so they had to be ready. But what did the company have planned for them? Court Bauer, who was a writer at the company at that time, says, "We're getting ready to go to Chicago for WrestleMania 22. We had our last meeting going into there with Vince. He goes, we got to get some new heels for Cena. We got to keep feeding this guy. We need monsters." So Eddie and I are on the phone, and at the hotel we just came up with Umaga, and it was as a callback, throwback to his uncles doing the Wild Samoans gimmick, but with a modern twist with the grill piece. I pitched him the face paint. Originally I wanted it to be a temp tattoo. 72 hours later, he debuted on Raw. That's how fast he went from sitting out. Concept sign off, now he's making a big impact. So he had a new character with a wild side like his ancestors. As Jim Ross tells us, drawings were made to create his character. They gave him a real good repackaging and imagined an original, unique look, and worthy of the single spotlight that he was about to have for the first time in his career. He was going to be a monster heel, as they call them, just like Yokozuna was before him, for example, and the whole idea was that he represented a new dangerous opponent for John Cena, the champion at that moment. By the way, one day Jim Ross told Vince McMahon about Umaga. "Your dad would love this guy because he would have been a great opponent for Bruno Sammartino." He's one of those monster heels Bruno could have got multiple main events out of in Madison Square Garden. When I see Umaga, I am amazed by his identity, his originality. He was a very unique character that we will remember for sure. And in my opinion, there should be more destructive monsters with such a unique identity in the modern era. In addition, he was perfectly launched, and here is another big positive point of Umaga. During all his beginnings and his first year, he was very well booked, very well built, and the Federation managed to give him an aura of power. On April 3rd, 2006, just after WrestleMania 22, Ric Flair was in the ring with Armando Estrada, and the Cuban businessman had someone to introduce to the Nature Boy. And we are witnessing at that moment the first official appearance of the character of Umaga. For the record, it's a word that designates the last and most painful stage of the process of getting a tattoo in Samoan. It means the end, and I think it's perfect for a wild beast who comes to destroy everyone. It recalls the idea of a final boss. For this first appearance, there were several things to notice. He doesn't yet have dreadlocks in his hair, he has a piercing in his nose, he doesn't yet have a bandage on his thumb. But on the other hand, we already feel a wild and tribal side thanks to a theme song with drums and face paint. On that day, he destroyed Ric Flair, with in particular a move that I love, and which will become one of his signatures. The Samoan Wrecking Ball, where he rushes at the opponent sitting in the corner of the ring and blows his head off. He didn't have the famous Samoan Spike yet, his destructive finisher with his thumb, which he will start doing in the following weeks. An awesome element that we already noticed is that he is a wild beast that only obeys his master, Armando Estrada. More generally, he won't speak English, which gives him even more an animal side with his own rules, which we cannot control. The following weeks, adjustments will be made, while Umaga continues the destruction of his opponents. For his first pay-per-view match, he will destroy Ric Flair at Backlash in just over 3 minutes. Do you realize his incredible beginnings? To slaughter a legend like Ric Flair, the record holder for the number of world titles, in such a short time for his first match on pay-per-view. That's impressive. I love it, and that's how a superstar becomes super legit. Then, for months, he was invincible. In 2006, he beat John Cena, Triple H, Shawn Michaels, among others, and he was perhaps the wrestler who was booked the strongest of the entire roster for a while. So unfortunately, everything ended with a loss on a roll-up against John Cena at the New Year's Revolution 2007 show, something that deeply upsets me. I think it was a very bad decision. Once again, Cena broke the momentum of a superstar whose aura was based on this invincibility. So of course, Umaga had won in the summer of 2006, but it still angers me because he should have struggled a lot more instead of winning their first real serious match on pay-per-view. In addition, with a roll-up, it sends the message that we want Super Cena to win, but we also don't fully go with it. So, Even if this booking decision pissed me off, I must admit that the last man standing match that Umaga and Mr. Hustle Loyalty Respect had at the Royal Rumble a few weeks later was amazing. Umaga was faithful to this wild side that I find great since his beginnings. He sticks out his tongue, he screams, he also has golden teeth. We will also note that in his Titantron we see a kind of mask with red eyes, which is reminiscent of the mask in the video game Crash Bandicoot. When I look at Umaga, I really see an animal. This face-to-face that the two men had at the beginning was great, I think. There was a chemistry and an incredible contrast between the superhero on the one hand and the monster on the other. Umaga's in-ring was powerful and rich, between the Samoan Spike, the Samoan Wrecking Ball, the Samoan Drop the Splash, and a kind of bear hug. It was a violent match, like the moment when Cena threw the stairs of the ring at his opponent. The splash on Umaga's table that Cena avoids, the blood of course, the huge punch too. At one point, Cena even had a comeback in Hulk Hogan fashion, and it really reminds old school wrestling in a good way, namely a heroic babyface who must defeat the big bad monster, and at least Umaga will have managed to present Cena as an ultimate fighter in this match. I find the finish incredibly original too. Cena will do his STF submission move, but he will also use the ring rope to strangle Umaga, which creates a mind-blowing visual with a bleeding Cena who gives his last energy into this battle to win. This will lead to a pass out from the Samoan and a count of 10, and therefore a new victory for the Cenation leader. What a masterpiece. Did it also make an impact on you? In his career, Umaga could also be proud of one amazing thing. He played an important role in the main attraction of WrestleMania 23. That year, they set up a battle of billionaires between Donald Trump and Vince McMahon. Everyone will have to choose a representative and the loser will be forced to have his head shaved. And it's Umaga that Vince is going to choose to represent him, which is still not nothing, I think, in addition to being in a match that will get a lot of media attention. In this road to WrestleMania 23, Umaga will even win his first title in the Federation, the Intercontinental title, on February 19th against Jeff Hardy, which gives him even more credibility. Donald Trump will choose Bobby Lashley, the ECW champion, as his representative, and it will lead to a match at WrestleMania which, if not the last one of the show, was clearly the main attraction. Moreover, you should know that this show is the second best-selling pay-per-view in the history of the company behind WrestleMania 28. And that until 2012 it was the #1. Do you realize how crazy it is for Umaga to find himself in this match for his first WrestleMania? As we expected, Umaga will lose, even if it wasn't clean since he got a stunner from the special guest referee for this clash, Stone Cold Steve Austin. This is also the second pinfall he suffered since April 2006. In any case, I think that for Umaga it was already a real achievement to be there, with maximum exposure, and no one will be able to take away from him that he was one of the major players in the main selling point of one of the most watched shows in pro wrestling history. When we think about all these positive points of Umaga, his family, his look, his agility, his power, his in-ring, his booking for a whole period, we can only be impressed. So yes, it's true that after he was suspended because of a growth hormone that he ordered from a pharmacy, and that after that he was never as dominant as before, it's undeniable. But according to many testimonies behind the scenes, Umaga was an awesome person, a bright human being who gave joy to everyone, and whose tragic death broke the hearts of many people. So for all of these reasons I say that yes, Umaga was indeed amazing. Now, you know why I think Umaga was awesome? Come and give your opinion in the comments if you're not such a big fan of him, or if on the contrary he made an impact of you, if your perception of this superstar may have evolved. In any case, the whole idea is to talk about it together, to exchange our opinions with respect, of course. We're here to share our passion, and that's the most important thing. We can say that Umaga was really special. I hope you had a good time watching this video, and I invite you to stay on the paradise of wrestling to look at some other ones. See you right away.
And that's the bottom line, 'cause Stone Cold said so. What?